right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Aeon 14 podcast. My name is James S. Aaron. I'm back in the saddle, and I am joined by the Aeon 14 team, including our illustrious leader, Michael Cooper. On board today, we've got our editor, Jen McDonald, authors Lisa Richmond. We're fortunate to have Amy Duboff with us, and then the Aeon 14 Renaissance man, Andrew Dobell. Who, if you did not know, also creates most of the fantastic art that you see on our covers, calendars, posters, and awesome things of that nature. We talk about all things Aeon 14 and all things related, from the science behind the series to science fiction in general, why Stargate is better than Babylon 5, other things that we think are cool and that you tell us you would like to hear about. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about what is it to be human today. Not transhumanism necessarily, but yeah, I'm going to get that out there. And then, but before we do that, let's have some updates. Michael?
Alrighty. So next thing that's coming out is going to be Lisa's Tau Ceti, which she and I have been slaving away on. More like she's been slaving away on it. As I'm prone to do, I gave her like this giant ream of things after reading through everything, saying, okay, Lisa, we need to change all this stuff. And then I said, you've got a day job, you can fit it in, right? And she's done really well. It's really come together. We made some changes, I think, there that causes the story to really resonate for both of us a lot, which I think is the first step to making a great story. So that happened. That's going to be out November 8th. We're actually going to be in Vegas at the time, so we'll probably have like a celebratory drink or something like that. I think that sounds about right. Yeah. And following that, we're going to have Earth and Ascendancy, which it used to be that the Rika books kicked my ass, but the Rika books seem to be coming really well now. Now it's the Orion War books that are kicking my ass, and this one's no different. And mainly because I have to strategize a lot better than I'm capable of. I'm like, okay, what would Tanis do? I'm like, I have no clue. I'm not as smart as Tanis is, but I think I've got there. I've kind of figured out how this whole thing's going to go down. So that's been a riot, and then right after that, we'll be coming to Killshot, which I'm also really stoked about. And I've been making a bunch of notes and ideas for that because Killshot's actually the first book that's going to take place pretty much entirely on Earth, which is kind of funny. Like I think we're 60 or 70 books in or something like that at this point, and that book is finally happening on Earth. I think until now, like the most Earth stuff that ever happened were flashbacks of Andy growing up in Raleigh. Was it Raleigh that he grew up in? No, Charleston is where he grew up.
Yeah, Somerville. I said Charleston.
Yeah. And so he was there, and then Tanis had like a brief meeting in Jerhatton one time, and that's been about it actually that we've seen for Earth. So so we're actually going to get some Earth in. Well, I guess there was a little bit in the end of Blackest Night. Someone actually took a train ride from Dublin to Kenya, which is sort of a crazy thing to think. She took a train ride from Dublin to Kenya, and it took about 25 minutes, I think, was the time for that ride. Because there's a mountain, I forget what the mountain is. Is it Kilimanjaro? It might be Kilimanjaro. I might be getting it wrong if it's Kenya or not. It'll be in the book. If the book's right, I'm wrong. Anyway, there's a mountain pretty much smack dab on the equator, right in the East Africa. It's a very high mountain, so that's where one of the space elevators is. And I like thinking about that too. Like, what would happen? Like, how would the world change when the major trade centers move to the equator? And you've got places like Kenya, and you've got places in, well, I guess Southeast Asia wouldn't change that too much, but Ecuador, would become like a hot spot for trade and whatnot. Although you don't have to have elevators everywhere, because there is one in Puerto Rico too. It kind of goes up at an angle. So I think it's really fun to think about that stuff. And I know, Jen, I see your hand. I'm bringing it back around here. I'm not going to go through all the other books, but there's a whole bunch of other books coming up. I've also got like a lot of cool swag, and some of the stuff up on Society 6. This is like the Everything is Better in Purple t-shirt, which I think is fantastic. I'm actually also wearing the Team Basilisk one right now too. So Team Basilisk, cool. Which is an awesome t-shirt. And then
the one Jen and I are really looking forward to.
Oh yes, let me get that one's next.
Give me a drum roll.
There we go. So these ones, you can actually see the letters a lot better in person. Yes. But nice. Fight Like a Girl, and then that's on the back, and then the front it just says Aeon 14. And then there's
double-sided. Get out of here.
What was that?
They've like upped their game at Society 6.
That's not Society 6.
These ones are from
That's right.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to Vistaprint.
Oh yeah.
Vistaprint. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't used to like Vistaprint ones because they use Fruit of the Loom shirts, which have this weird thing. Like if you get like an extra large Fruit of the Loom shirt, it just gets wider and doesn't get any longer. So like, so you end up with like these shirts, if you wash them once or twice, you're like, yes, you can see my navel, isn't it lovely, So,
A
and that's
lot
like,
of women's shirts do that.
yeah, I noticed that actually, because I wanted to just to see what the size difference was, because the women's extra large is basically the same size as the men's large, except it's about this much shorter, which I thought was kind of annoying.
It's
Although in theory, women's torsos are shorter too. So, in theory,
but-
although I guess a woman as tall as me would have a torso as long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, all of that aside, but the shirts are really nice. The quality on them is great, and they're less money. So what I'm actually going to do is, if they do fit everybody well, because we go to Vegas, people could try them on. I'll make sure they fit properly. I'm actually going to order a bunch of them from Vistaprint, and I'm just going to sell them directly on Amazon, because I have an account now where I can do that. And I actually have an account where I can ship stuff to Amazon, and they just send it too. So I might do that, just to sell them all that way. I'll become like a real merchant.
Consulting through Prime.
I'll be all grown up. And then another one I have too. I'll have these at Vegas for anyone who shows up that wants one. Just some straight up Aeon 14, and then they're black on the back. And somewhere, actually in here somewhere too. This is one I did because Andrew, Andrew being in the UK doesn't get to bring a lot of cool stuff over to the US because luggage, you can't haul a lot of luggage. So I actually made these shirts too from Andrew's stuff, Star Magi, and it has a magi on the back.
Smuggles it all down his pants.
Yeah,
Full of t-shirts.
Yeah. So I have 3. So if you really want one, Jen, that might end up working. On top of that, by the way, Jen, I have cards so that we can work out Snark. I got 12 decks so we can play test Snark.
Okay, a lot of people are gonna love hearing that.
Yeah. So I've got the rules worked out, and I've got the cards, so we're gonna be able to play test. It's actually we have a schedule for the team, like what we're gonna be doing at Vegas, and Jen actually put in on Monday morning that we're gonna be play testing Snark. And then I got the calendar as well. So this is the calendar that Andrew has been slaving away on all the art for. Well, not all the art, because there's one to one Andrew didn't do.
Not that one.
But there's some other great stuff like this particular shot here, which is, let me get it closer. This is Tanis and Jessica fighting a mech in a docking bay. So just some cool stuff. Like we don't ever get to see images like that on book covers because they're not wide enough to fit a lot of that stuff. And then some classics too, like Tanis on Thebes and whatnot are all in there. So this calendar will be, actually the first run of them all will be signed by both myself and Andrew, because I'm going to bring them to Vegas, and then Andrew's going to scrawl his name on them as well. So, and we're going to do it on, I'm going to make Andrew's hands sore because we're going to do it like on every single page, every single piece of art. Because I realized, like a lot of people don't really want calendars, but I said, this is also a way for $20 to get 12 prints basically for $20. So and this is good glossy paper too. So in that respect, this is actually a really good deal. You're going to spend $20 and get 12 prints. And then for anybody who wants one, I did these just because I thought it'd be kind of cool to have them, but this is just a single page calendar. And then this is the one where we were like we went with all the booty shots. Like this is just let's just amp it up. Jen's giving me this look right now. I can see it just like you.
You don't know that?
It was on your face.
Jenny,
I know you were giving me that look. It was right there.
I didn't know.
That's actually the cover for Orion Front, which I have to put for pre-order pretty soon too. So plenty of cool stuff going on there. I think that's all the swag I had to show off today. Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay.
So that's it.
really need to up your game there.
I know, right?
Not enough swag.
I was speaking with someone, actually, with her name is Bonnie. She does the newsletters. Well, I write the copy on the newsletter, and then she puts the whole thing together, organize the tests, all the links, and all that jazz. And she's like talking about like things people can do, like video assets and whatnot that authors can do to help promote themselves. I'm like, I'm doing all this stuff, and she's like you're just producing. Like, actually, I'm producing so much stuff, I'm not really using it that effectively. So I've got to up my game on that because there's just so much stuff. But yeah, I love the swag and all that. It's fun.
Well, it is fun to see it in different forms. I mean, that's the cool thing. It makes it more real, right? Yeah. So I'm going to put Amy and Andrew on the spot. And do you have any updates for us as well from your worlds? Because that would be cool to share.
Go ahead, Amy.
I just completed the Dark Stars trilogy, which Jim had mentioned in the other podcast video. That is, the basic premise of that is there's this crystalline network that connects all of the worlds, and it has a hyperdimensional storage unit So there are these crystals, and you can use them to reset the reality. The mechanism of how all of this works is explained over the course of the books, but that's the basic premise of it. There's this darkness that's corrupting everything. So that trilogy is complete. I'm now diving into what we're calling the Serenity series, which is the one I'm going to be writing with Michael, and that is a spin-off of the Dance on the Moons of Serenity, following the character Terry. We're still working out the details of exactly what that's going to be, but it's going to have a lot of political intrigue and stuff, which is going to tie in well with my experience in my Catacomb series. So that's what's coming up.
Very cool.
Brilliant. Myself, I moved my kind of urban fantasy series into a space fantasy series, Star Maga. You saw the shirt that Michael showed. So book 1 came out about a month or so ago, and book 2, I'm just about to start writing book 2 because I've been writing book 3 of my post-apocalyptic series. They're all in the same universe, they're all connected, but it's been a lot of fun going back into my post-apocalyptic and channeling my Mad Max love. So but I'm looking forward to getting back into doing Star Magi, and also doing the collaboration with a certain other author that's on this screen. So pull your finger out and get writing, Michael, because we want to get that one going.
Pull your finger out.
I know what.
Wow.
But anyway, that's. I mean, we've started.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of chapters kind of working on that, and it's looking pretty good already.
Yeah, once Tana stops making everything really difficult for me, I'll be diving back in. I'm currently in the middle of writing 3 books simultaneously. I was telling Andrew. So
I know you are.
I learned that my limit is 3. I can't do more than 3. Can't remember what's happening in any of them.
Most people can't do 1, so you're doing okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so today we were going to talk about what it is to be human, which I have to acknowledge is a big subject, which I think could be approached from a number of different ways. But one of the things that we don't always dwell on in Aeon 14 is that transhumanism is a fairly core value of the series, where most characters are augmented in some, if not overt way, like Rika, whose humanity has been, or whose body has been almost completely replaced, and her motivations are tied to others, what they impose on her, to people that may have just even their eyes are reinforced by nano, or some sort of the way we would think about a I don't know, a heart implant or a pacemaker or something like that we don't really think about these days. Like in the future, that might become even more fundamental to the way our bodies work. And I think we see it even today. We have people that might consider that inhuman, right? I mean, the minute that you change something fundamental about your body, have you changed your experience of the world? And the cool thing about our brains is they just kind of are like, cool, let's do that, and move ahead with it. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and it's something that I have put a lot of thought into when I think about the idea of the learning AI, like the weapon-born. And the question comes up in Vesta Burning, where they don't really want to engage with it, because I think there are there are people that would definitely say an AI is not human, whereas the AI themselves have to grapple with this question: why am I not human? Why is my perception of the world and the way I see the world might be different, but I still perceive the world in the same way that, or in a method that humans see the world. The world still exists, right? Unless we're all living inside a giant simulation, like people say we might be as well. But these are things I've tried to wrap my brain around, and I'm curious, like, what other folks are thinking about this as well. That eventually, if we do have sensors for eyes and we can see 50 colors, does that make us inhuman because we don't see the world the same way anymore as people in the past did? Or even now, as we extend our brains with with smartphones, are we fundamentally different than someone 100 years ago that never saw beyond their own village? So those are things that I've been thinking about. What does everyone else think?
I mean, I think I think that it does definitely make us different than people who lived 100 years ago, when that wasn't their experience. But this is our experience. This is the time we're living in now, and we aren't any less human just because we have things available to us that weren't available to us before. I mean, I would argue that our humanness created these things. They came from our brains, from our abilities, and our, like, the things that we desired to see in the world, and so they came about because of our humanness. And so our access to them, I wouldn't think makes us any less human.
And that's interesting. Go ahead.
They're the tools that augment our experience. I mean, just the way that you could use a stick to put it into an ant mound and pull out food. It's just an extension of that. With the world being what it is now in the population, you need ways to communicate with people and global commerce and all of that. So it's productivity tools in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
The world is expanding, therefore our reach has to expand. Our tools need to reach farther to do the same things. So,
And one of the things you said, Jen, and then something you said as well, James, when you talk about 100 years ago and heart transplants, how long ago was it when humanity thought that the soul resided in the heart, not the brain? And then are you human if your heart has been transplanted? If that's what you believe?
No, you're a monster.
So, it's things evolve, beliefs evolve, the ability to understand stuff like that. Obviously that's not the case. That's obviously not where the soul is. But
my soul's in my tummy. I don't know what you guys are talking about. I'm a Care Bear.
That's a good one. I like that.
So are we already doing transhumanism because we do things like, transplant hearts, or we have artificial hearts, or,
I think we are. We just haven't accepted it.
Yeah.
I think I forget who it says now, but the human brain is infinitely more adaptable than any machine. In that it takes a shockingly small amount of time for us to accept new normals. Although it depends, because certain ones seem to take a lot longer than others. But for example, like, we all think of, like, the fact that actually, this is really funny. Remember when we were kids in school and our teachers told us we wouldn't always have a calculator with us? And it turns out we all carry around supercomputers in our pockets now. It's rather bizarre. I actually do always have a calculator with me now. It's almost permanently attached to my body, which would be kind of handy in many respects. You have to worry about losing it or dropping it in the toilet or anything. Never dropped a phone in the toilet, but now I'm going to. But 8 years ago, or 10 years ago, this didn't exist. Cell phones 10 years ago were garbage. They couldn't do anything. They could make phone calls, which is something none of us use them for anymore. Like, I actually haven't answered my cell phone now in, I don't know, like 3 years or something like that. My thought is, like, if it's important, they'll text me or they'll leave a message. And if they won't, then it's a telemarketer and I don't care.
Well, what do you do when they leave a message? Do you call them back?
I don't think I have in over a year.
Wow.
I think usually what I do is I just email them or something like that.
I'm going to call you just to see if you answer.
I would answer if you called me, Jen. Actually, the last person I think I talked to, the last person I think I called was you, in the summer of 2016.
No, I made you talk to me on the phone when I was leaving my day job.
That's right. But that was a little bit later. You're right. That might be the last time I chatted with someone. I mean, I do video chats on the computer all the time. It's kind of funny. Like, I'll video chat people, no problem, on the computer, but using this phone thing and having to hold it to my ear and talk, it's like so barbaric. Why would I use this antiquated form of communication?
With this rash of spam calls that, I don't know if you're getting them in your part of the country or even in other parts of the world, but we've been getting a ton of spam that has local phone numbers on it. And it's made me realize that I don't want my phone to receive calls anymore. I want to be able, because it preempts everything else I'm doing, and I want to be able to turn that off, and I can't.
Yeah, I actually have a personal, this is a very short segue. It's called the tyranny of the urgent. Most people operate
I agree.
the tyranny of the urgent, and I actually despise phones because they are an urgently tyrannical device in just the way they work. I want to be able to respond to people. If I'm in my rationale is, if I'm in person with someone, they always have priority, and then and then which is why phones bother me so much, because they interrupt in-person things. And then, but everything else, I want to communicate with people sort of. I think it's possible because we've all been trained, especially in our generation, in our jobs in many cases, we've been trained that communication is something that you do casually with people, and you can have a conversation that spans an entire afternoon over chat. And that's actually, in many cases, a preferable way to have a conversation, because it doesn't have to interrupt what you're doing right away. Which could almost be like, we could almost like examine that at some point and see where we think that would go. But I do think like that we are very adaptable in how we communicate and what we consider to be normal. Like the fact that for me now, I consider, real-time conversations with people on the phone to be just a really bizarre thing that I can't understand why anyone would want to do it. And I consider the normal way to communicate with people to be over chat, because that's actually how I communicate with most people. So it's, and even when I had like a regular day job, most of my team was spread around the globe. So that's actually how I talk with all the people that works for me too. And one of the main things actually that might have changed my thinking too is that we established a rule that if there were any conversations that were had, they had to be done in chat. You couldn't have conversations with people in person, because then the rest of the team couldn't participate, and it made them feel like they weren't really part of the team.
Right.
So
Well, it's
even
also easier to track when things are in writing too, so you can like look back on
it is, yeah,
chat or whatever.
Yeah.
And you
Absolutely. I completely agree. Having it there so you can actually scroll back up, especially in terms of business.
Yeah.
yeah.
But we're moving far away from transhumanism. Yeah.
Well, I think it's related, because it's a way that we've extended the power of our memories. Like, even I was just thinking about, so I'm the admin of a large Facebook, or one of the admins of a large Facebook group. And one of the things that we figured out we had to do is we couldn't use chat, because there was, for certain things, because there was just so much crap in the chat, that we had to make a separate group where you'd post an issue and then people would respond to it. And in a way that extends your focus to be able to go back or even choose when you want to look at it, and then look at it, engage with it, which is not something a person 100 years ago would probably even understand what I was talking about, except I'm gonna put the town crier and make them stand in the square for 25 hours so I can go talk to them when I want to talk to them.
I do wonder if we're going to lose something when we're going to lose the power of memorization. Because I feel like memorization is actually a very useful thing, and it does help you. Like the fact that
it helps develop your brain, doesn't it? I mean,
it helps certain parts. Yeah, I mean, I hope. Like, I actually wish that they're not teaching my daughter to memorize a times table. I'm like, just teach her to memorize a times table, because memorization can actually work faster than trying to figure it out all the time. Just memorize the darn thing. I mean, understand how it works first, obviously, then memorize it and move on. Because when it comes to more complex things, you need to be able to get that answer instantly. You just need to be able to know, that 7 times 6 is 42, and so on and so forth. You don't need to work it out every time. But the other thing is even just memorization of text and whatnot. Like growing up, I knew people who had memorized the entire Bible, which is like what, 900,000 words or something.
Well, yeah, in the Middle Ages, like, people would do that, and there was a whole thing where you'd tie it to a room, and so you tie your experience of a text to the room. You look at different things in the room to jog your memory. There's a whole system monks would do.
They were Bible smugglers in China, and that's actually how they brought the Bible to people. They just memorized the whole thing.
Well, it wasn't a lot of the people who were POWs, like at the Hanoi Hilton and stuff like that, didn't they use a lot of the stuff that they had memorized just to keep their brains sharp?
I think, yeah, I've heard stuff like that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I have very little memorized, but the one thing I still remember things I memorized. Like, it's kind of amazing. Like, even years later, like the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, I still have that memorized. Wandered the brill with the should saute, the root of merch that passes to the rote, and bathed every vein in sweet liqueur. And like I can make it all the way up to the Squire story, if I've had enough sleep. And I memorized that in grade 12, and I can still remember it. But
I hate that freaking book.
I kind of like it. I mean, it's a weird book. It's I think the part of the reason why I had this 5'3" Welsh teacher that taught it, and he made it way more fun than it would have been otherwise, because he was hilarious.
That's fair.
Yeah. But yeah, so I feel like, I wonder if we're going to lose something, as we replace parts of our brain with these abilities we used to have. But on the flip side, the amount of information, like I don't remember the exact dates. I think that the first time recently that the amount of information in the world doubled was like back in 1918 or something like that. So the amount of recorded information in the world doubled in 1918, and it doubled again like in the 30s, and it doubled again. It doubles every day now, basically. It's almost doubling every day. So you think about, like, is it even possible to memorize the amount of information we're bombarded with? Like, where James is talking about, like, admitting a Facebook group that's got, you know, several tens of thousands of members, they actually had to formulate a new way to deal with the information because you couldn't remember things in the flow. You had to have a way of referring back to it and whatnot. So we've changed the way that we think about things in many respects just to deal with the amount of information that we have, which like what Amy was saying about just the fact that it's a global world now. We need new tools to understand how we're dealing with it. But
one thing I'll say, you know, when we think about extending our humanity through technology is that I still feel we don't have a really good handle on everything our brain does. Like our bodies do absorb all the time information wise. Like I was just thinking about the fact that like I have you know, certain things I memorized in the Army that are also very much tied to emotion and place, and like it's just seared on my brain, right? And why did my brain do that? My brain is absorbing so much constantly that only now we're still figuring out how like PTSD works, where, you know, certain chemical reactions in the brain tend to, you know, imprint other certain memories stronger than others. And why do we do that? And we don't know. And we could be in a place where that even changes, you know, is from what we're seeing. But the information we create is relatively flat in a certain way, but the experience that our brains are imprinting and saving is so much deeper than I think we realize a lot of the time, that there is much more information out there than we even are maybe aware of.
Kind of like what we were talking about last week about, you know, mirror neurons and how much your experience is embedded in, like you said.
You mean like how it's more than just sight and sound. It's,
yeah,
you know, we're just the words that were said. That it's how we felt at the time. It's like, you know, is that burger you ate last night sitting with you well when someone yells at you the next morning?
Yeah.
And the way that you record that emotion is so tied to your state at the time. And last week we talked about like if we were to store all those memories and just go back to them, would you experience them the same? And then could you actually even change who you were by experiencing those exact same memories a different way, without all the other baggage that might have been attached to it at the time? And if eventually you could store all those memories and go back to them, would it change who you were? And then we wandered all the way down to like, could someone just change your past and you wouldn't even know it anymore because you live in these sort of artificially stored memories all the time?
Yeah. So if you're watching this podcast and you're curious about that and you haven't watched the last one, go back and watch the last one.
I need to go catch up. But I think that's something when we think about what makes us human is the fact that the fallacy of thinking you can really relive the past, because you can't. The minute you go back, you're a different person with a different experience.
I actually saw an article just the other day. I haven't dived into it all the way yet because it's on a pay site that I finally decided I'm going to pay to get their content. But they're talking about how some scientists have recently determined that it may be that we remember things, you actually recreate the memory fresh. Mm-hmm. Your brain actually recreates the memory as though you had just had it happen, but it's not going to be the same. Like it doesn't actually have there's no perfect recall mechanism in your brain. It just recreates things based on random bits of information, which is why our memories basically suck. Although they don't at the same time. Like I just proved.
What about people with you know, eidetic memories? You know, the people that have perfect recall. I mean, there's not many of them, but
well, the interesting thing is that there's no such thing as one side note. It's always been a fallacy. There's no one with perfect.
Okay.
It is very, very good. It's close enough to fool most people, but now that we have like video and stuff like that, we can actually go and test people and things aren't actually exactly how they remember. Okay. I don't know though. I haven't looked into why they're so much better at it though. Because I mean, they are in theory better at it. And I have a better memory than my wife does. Just in general, I don't know why that is either. Although I feel like
my brother has a better memory than me. He can remember things from when we were children, which I just can't remember at all. Yeah. So
going back to the things that make us human, I think one of the things that makes human is not only our ability to like be so tied to our emotions, but the fact that we make decisions based on emotions more. Well, some of us do that more than based on instinct or logic or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like we make reactionary decisions based on how we feel. And I don't think that's something like animals do. I mean, I don't know.
Would argue that that's the only thing that animals do.
Yeah. I think animals do that, but you know, they're
so much of it is tied to instinct, like predator and
prey. But they always live in the now. They're never using logic to determine, you know, what's the better thing that they should do. So in many respects, because living in the now is living in your emotions. Like if everything is based on how I feel right now, that is the completely emotion driven. I mean, assuming that they have the same chemical stuff in their brains causing emotions. I don't know if all animals do, but I guess my statement could be refuted by the fact that squirrels store nuts and beavers make dams, and they plan that stuff out. So they must be using some amount of logic and pre-planning. I guess it depends on the species. I actually, one of the things I think is we could sort of dive into is that we think about like augmenting ourselves that make us more human or less human. But what about people that have less human already? People that are missing limbs, people that are missing certain senses, like some people can't smell, people that are colorblind.
And that's where I think it gets into these arbitrary distinctions that we make to kind of gatekeep ourselves. Like we would never say that a person who is deaf is inhuman or not human, but a person, what's that?
Sorry, James.
Oh, but that's where these distinctions come into play, and you try and, I don't know. I think if we compare these things with 100 years from now with now, we're going to see that a lot of these distinctions are arbitrary and don't actually matter. But that's the weird thing about our brains, is that we do have to like incrementally accept things over time. We can't just deal with something all at once like that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if a large part of what is human is really just what is society, more than anything else.
So our culture derives our humanity.
Maybe to a certain extent, because if you look at people that are missing parts of their bodies or don't have the same experience, we still consider them to be human because they sort of conform to culture in the same way. They have the same sorts of values that we do. Like for example, there's a book by C.S. Lewis that I highly recommend people read. It's a religious book, but he has a lot of interesting thoughts.
Chronicles of Narnia.
No, it's called Mere Christianity. C.S. Lewis is kind of fascinating because he was an atheist, and he believed all religions were wrong. And then J.R.R. Tolkien converted C.S. Lewis to Christianity. And C.S. Lewis is quoted as saying, "I'm the only person that's ever been drugged kicking and screaming into heaven." Because he tried to disprove all religions and determined that he couldn't disprove Christianity, and then became one. But he uses a lot of logic to explain why and his conclusion is that there's a God through all of this logic, and that God created all these things. But he does talk about this thing called natural law, and he says that there is an observable natural law in the universe where we all conform to the same sorts of things. He said, like, there's not a place in the world where running away in battle is considered to be courageous. There's not a place in the world where if you steal someone's seat at a stadium, that's considered the right thing to do. If you push someone out of their seat and take their seat at a stadium, there's no place in the world where that's the right thing to do. That is always the wrong thing to do.
I just maximized usage of that seat because obviously the other person wasn't utilizing it as effectively as I can.
There you go.
It's a capitalist equilibrium.
I don't think even capitalism works with that, but well, I could say that maybe capitalism does that, but no one thinks it's good. Humanity.
I beg to differ. I haven't read the book, so I'm not going to shoot holes in it. But
it's you only have to read like the first couple of chapters to get this part of the argument as well that he goes through. But he's like 2 and 2 is always 4, and no society considers stealing things to be a way to make the society work better. No functional society agrees that chaos is a way to make the society work better. If there wasn't any societies that thought that, they went away because they failed. And they ceased to exist, and they didn't breed because they all died. And now we don't have those thoughts. But I think a lot of that is what is humanity, is our shared belief system about what is good and what is bad. And a humanist standpoint would be to argue that those things came about because those were the successful things. Like all the people that did things that didn't work, like where the men refused to have sex with women. For whatever reason, they didn't want to do that. Those people aren't around anymore, and whatever genetic code made that predisposition happen isn't around anymore either, because they didn't breed. And the successful people bred, and that reinforced all these things. So the humanist view would say that that's because it's just what's successful, and of course the religious view says that's because that's the way God made us.
But I would argue it's our ability to adapt there, because just like the DNA example, like we're reaching a point where that DNA could be saved, and so biological reproduction might not be the method that those genes are passed down.
Yeah, I was sort of using an example of why humanity may have come to be human the way it is. It's just because of it's either A, because of what was successful, or it's B, because of the way that God made us.
I mean, I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago where a professor was emphatically saying that we were talking about traffic safety and like the mix of pedestrians, bikes, and cars, and he was emphatically believed that there is safety in chaos. And he was applying it to everything, almost political theory, that hierarchies lead to oppression, and we should strive to have beneficial chaos in our lives, which is kind of an anarchic view of how culture operates. But I would kind of say that like being human is our ability to navigate these things, right? Because like just thinking about like stealing all your stuff is the right thing to do. Well, I mean, for 60 years, communists thought that was the right thing to do. And,
Yeah,
so I
but
don't
no
know.
one really felt good about it, you know.
I mean, it's interesting like that, and even like thinking about it in terms of stealing, of taking. I would say that as all these things change and these ideas constantly adapt, or evolve. It's our ability to adapt to them and these changing stimuli from our environment. That, getting back to what Jen was saying, like, is the response human or is the experience human? Like once we even maybe like our brains are attached to mechs, like what, and we're controlling all the sensory input. How much of our humanity can we control, and once we do control it, do we stop being human? Is that the end point?
So I don't agree that mods make us any less human. I think we are born human, and so anything that happens to our body or our experience, or our body or our brain over the time of our experience, is just how we are then humaning. Right? Unless we are killed and remade as something else, we don't stop being human until we no longer are on that timeline, that lifeline that we have. And so like Rika, I don't think she stopped being human when they mechanized her.
Right.
I think she had to adapt to this new body that she was given, these new circumstances that she found herself in, that she had no control over, but she was still her. It wasn't her skin or her lady bits that made her human, So I don't think people with like prosthetic limbs or anything like that are any less human because they are not living their experience any less. They're still living this life. They're applying themselves to the life that they've been given.
I wonder how much
people like Cheeky who, were spoilers, by the way. She was she was killed, but she kind of had her memories partially reinstated and mixed with an AI and then put in an artificial body, and then
so I would argue that the Cheeky version 2.0 is not actually human.
Okay.
That's what I would argue, but it's not because she's
still a person, but she's not human.
Yes.
And that's a differentiation point.
I actually think that the AIs are human. I agree. I think Cheeky is human and so are the AIs.
How do you, let's
explain.
Look at the difference between the words human and person.
Yeah.
And they're individuals.
Human means a man version of God is what human means. Is that what we're going for? Like the root words?
I just think it's a species.
I was looking at it as species.
Well,
but if you're looking at it with that definition, Michael, I agree with you.
That's the distinction that we're exploring, though, is the difference that human is the experience of the world. And so if you change the species, like, are they still, I guess you're true. We're getting into like if there are different species of human. I guess I'm thinking of the experience of the world and the way humans do that versus the minutia of biology.
So I guess I should clarify the part that I think the AIs are human. It's because the AIs, the more successful AIs in Aeon 14, like the ones that came from the Weaponborn and whatnot, used human neural structure to then create an AI structure because humans were looking for something that wasn't alien in many respects. And a pure digital AI had motivations that just didn't coincide with the humans' motivations. So they made AIs that were like humans, and they could work with them more like they were humans. And also because we knew that humanity was generally successful, as a species, if we're going to think of it that way. But these AIs, they still have brains. I mean, every kind of AI is going to have a brain, and the brain is going to process sensory input, and it's going to make decisions about how to achieve its goals and how not to die for stupid reasons and stuff like that.
Well, they were made in our image.
Yeah, we are.
They were human influenced, human made, and then they evolved from that ground map of
That template.
But if you think, most of the AIs have similar motivations to humans. They want the same things out of life, and they experience the same world. You know, they still are constrained by the same physical world that we're constrained by. You know, now they have ways of getting around that, but you could argue that sort of the humans, any human who wanted to could just go off and do a sim and live in a virtual world all they wanted. So I view, and I actually very specifically always call AIs people in the books. And I don't call them humans because I don't want to confuse things. I think it'd be confusing to call them humans, but I do call them people.
Yeah.
But I also think there are AIs out there that are so alien that we wouldn't consider them to be human. That their motivations are so strange and so unrelated that we wouldn't be able to consider them human. And then you also consider, like, is Crash human-ish? The Crash the parrot, you know, he has a lot of the same motivations that humans does. He wants his progeny to survive. He wants to have friends and people to talk with. You know, he does very human things. Now that might just be because we're humans and we're writing them. So maybe everything we pretend to make is all human. We're anthropomorphizing everything. I don't know. But the interesting thing is, like, we can't conceive of another successful way of thinking other than the one we already have. Well, I don't know if that means that there isn't one or not, but I can't conceive of a world where, like I said, we're running away in battle ends up being a winning strategy. Like, if you always run away in battle, how is that a winning strategy? You know, if you never apply cunning to anything, how will you survive against a cunning foe?
So you're using the word human, although you use it two different ways. You're using the word human to describe AI because you're using that synonymously with the word person. Sort of.
I largely use it with
not as species. Not
right.
as
Yeah. When I think of
Jen was using it as species.
Right, and in that case, you're right. Then Kiki wouldn't be a human species person anymore.
Right. She would be a hybrid kind of.
Although someone like Kiki might, Kiki might not make this particular statement, but someone else might say that we're just the next step in the evolution of humans.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
I guess
how much of humanity is our battle against entropy? Because when you think about the universe in general, everything goes from a state of higher order to a state of lesser order, and I mean, which is the definition of entropy? Things
in a closed system.
Yeah. So, are we saying that this is not?
I don't know.
Talk to me about that. I mean, my house never gets cleaner.
It's not a thing that, but yet
I'm constantly battling entropy.
Yeah, but yet atoms have become more organized over time, and so has matter. You know, or maybe it has. Maybe it has. Maybe you could look at it and say that larger atoms are not more organized than hydrogen.
But humans constantly battle entropy.
Well, yeah, it's because
and do other animals do that? I guess they do. I guess they do in a way. I mean, they're
like you just
building nests and stuff.
Well, even just the idea that we have to have food.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Okay. Never mind.
So I think all animals.
Scratch that. Move on.
But you could say, I mean, the interesting thing is you could say that the struggle against entropy is one of our defining characteristics, because the world we live in wants to kill us. Yeah. And if we don't do anything about it, it will. And it'll do it in about 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So
that's
why I think that our brains
humanities need to survive.
Might not be special. Like, we just haven't found anyone else like us. So, like, the way that we respond to the world was created through a process, and we just haven't found anybody else that's gone through the process as far as we have, or in the same way. I mean, octopuses are getting there.
Yeah, and orcas.
Orcas,
no, they're actually octopuses.
Are they really?
Yeah, they're not octopi. Jen corrected me on that one.
Oh,
yeah, it's octopuses, which is just
weird
because of our stupid language. Doesn't make any sense.
Magi.
Yeah, Magi, Aeon, Tier, and Tire. It's just all chaos and madness.
And moving back to transhumanism.
But Jen, hi Jen, you're back.
Yeah, I cut out at a really stupid part.
Does that mean like you thought we were stupid? You just bailed. You're just like, I don't want to listen to you guys anymore?
Yeah.
I had this little your internet connection is unstable, and then everyone was frozen, and I was like, oh no, and I was trying to head it off, and then it crashed, and the last thing I heard was, well, is Crash human? And I'm like, wait, I have opinions about this. And I was gone.
you can weigh in.
We
were
can go
sort
back.
of
Yeah,
Go on.
Well, now I've missed a lot of stuff, huh?
we can receive your opinions.
we were talking. We moved on talking about like how what is human is really just our struggle against the world that wants to kill us, and how like
Also,
for example,
yes.
yeah, like if you do, well, I was saying like if you do nothing, if you don't eat and if you don't sleep and if you don't drink any water, you're going to die in about 3 days.
Yeah.
So everything that we do is to try and keep ourselves alive in a world that wants to kill us. That's largely defined our humanity. And like I said, I think it comes down to the things that are successful are the things that we do, and the things that aren't successful are the things we don't do. Like the species that like never bathed, the group of people humans that never bathed, they all died. Because I got ones that said, bathing is probably a good idea. They did better.
Bubonic plague.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which apparently I've heard is not rats. It was like hedgehogs or something like that. I forget what it was now. And apparently it was pinned on the rats. The rats were the fall guys. I forget what it was. It was some random animal.
Fleas,
You're like, what?
right?
Really? It was that animal?
Hedgehogs were carrying the fleas.
That was guinea pigs. Apparently guinea pigs pinned it on
Guinea
the rats, but it was really guinea pigs that spread the plague. So I just read it. I have no idea if it's true or if someone just wrote that on the internet and I believed it because it was funny. But anyway, Crash. Do you think Crash is human?
I do believe Crash is human.
He doesn't get to be human, but Crash does?
Because, hold on, listen, because he was implanted with the chip, which is again human made. And so it shifted his parrotness, his birdness. He could tell the difference between his bird way of thinking and his human way of thinking. He saw it happening.
That's true, he did.
And he still followed it. And so like he absorbed it. Like it wasn't his choice to become, like to have the chip implanted in his head. He didn't have any agency in that, just like Rika didn't have any agency in becoming mechanized. But they still, again, like took their situation and they survived. They figured out how to survive in these situations, based on what they had available to them. They used their resources and which is animalistic, but also human.
So why doesn't Cheeky get to be human, though? Because they took her cheekiness and implanted it in something else?
Well, her mental processes are the same, but at that point, I figure it's like a computer. It's backup storage. You've taken the cloud and just put it in a physical frame. Like if I die, but my genness is stored in a cube, like a Logan or Landon cube, and then I'm put in a vacuum cleaner. Am I still human?
That's kind of what you said about Crash, because that's a human chip put into a parrot.
Yeah, but he's still
or a vacuum cleaner.
He's still an organic living thing,
But
right?
But
I'm saying he was human made. The thing that he identified as like, oh, this is the. I forget how. I don't know if he was. James, did he say this is the human? He didn't say human, right? What did he? Or did he?
He eventually started using the word human, but I think originally
he thinks of them as not being parrots, but he knows it's just his stand-in for human.
Yeah.
Right, but when he would identify a thought process that was not his own, he would call out and be like, "Oh, that's." But I don't remember anyway.
You're right. No, he adapts, and I guess that gets back to our question of like, is adaptability even unique to humans? And it's not.
No.
But we just do it more than everybody else, it seems, or we change faster than everyone else.
Well, I think we have to because we have more items in our surroundings to manipulate, and so we are changing our surroundings faster because there are more variables that are like there's more permutations of things that can create our surroundings, and so we're having to adapt faster than animals in natural surroundings because they have less things that change around them at the pace with which our surroundings do.
It actually ties back, by the way, to we were talking about how people, John Q. Villager 1,000 years ago never left his village. His experience didn't change that much either.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty consistent. But on the flip side, a lot of people back then did travel a lot. It wasn't as insular as some people.
No, they were nomadic.
No, there are people like, for example, the Vikings in Sweden and Denmark traded with Constantinople on a regular basis, and they would actually sail their ships. Back 1,000 years ago, there were open waterways between Asia and Europe, which is one of the reasons why I used to think they were separate continents, because there was water between them. and the Vikings actually would just sail all the way down across Russia, and then they would end up in the Black Sea, and they would go to Constantinople. Now, some of these places were rivers and stuff like that, but they were for them, traveling 1,500 miles to trade with the Byzantines was just a thing they did. So I guess you could argue that they were modifying their experience, but that's sort of a tangent. But I guess where was I going to go with all of this? It's gone now.
No idea.
So something I was just thinking about as you were talking about that, Jen, was so if you did so cheeky, like if she perceives herself as human, and a human is interacting with, or I should say a person is interacting with her that doesn't know she's a copy, doesn't matter.
No,
And that's
she's putting herself forth as a human, and so
right.
I mean, we would be treating her the way that she is showing us to treat her, right?
And that's the crazy world that we're going to be living in, because if nobody knows that they're not human, to use quotes, or persons, doesn't matter. And if we're creating emotions and we think there's a soul there, like I'm just full on jumping off the shark here, but
well, I think just one thing about like is just because someone's brain is organic doesn't really mean anything. Just because these molecules make up these brain cells versus these molecules make up brain cells, I don't understand the difference. I don't understand why one of those would be different. And that's actually sort of a core premise in the books too. Like the AIs are like, we just have brains that are made out of different stuff than your brains. Just like a shark's brain is made out of different stuff. It doesn't mean that, or an orca's brain is made out of different stuff. It doesn't mean that we're less or that we don't have the same attributes. It's just different physical components that
they require different things to live, to function. They require
at a fundamental level, they don't.
You change the chemical soup. I don't care what cells the brain is made of, but if the chemicals
What?
Yeah, we got it.
What's
I
that?
think
Are you there?
What? Are you there? Yeah.
there we go. Is this
Okay, I'm
there?
hearing a lot of real weird echo things.
Yeah,
are we all echoing?
it was Jen. I had to mute Jen.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Okay. So it doesn't. Sorry, Jen. Hi, Jen. So if it doesn't matter what your brain is, what the atoms your brain is made of are comprised of. The chemical soup that goes through it, though, that's what changes your behavior and all that. So you could still have a brain that's made from something that is not organic, but if you run chemicals through it, wouldn't that? Did we lose Michael?
No, I'm still here.
No.
Okay.
Well, I think that's the problem, and we don't quite know. But I think to me, this is the core of the idea of the sentience wars, that humanity needs to figure this out, or at least let it go. And there are going to be people that don't want to let it go, and that's going to be what leads to that resource.
Like the Andersonians.
The Andersonians, or everyone else, as we try to come to terms with this new species that we have to live with. I'm using the word species when we didn't use that before, but these new people that we have to live with. I
do sometimes refer to the fact that there are two species in Aeon 14. There's aliens and there's humans and there's AIs. But I think the AI, you make a really good point, Lisa. Like, for example, how do they simulate emotions for Cheeky? Like, what's actually going on in her brain?
Yeah.
And I suppose one can make an argument that when Phineas and Ernest recreated her mind, they made a way to simulate the same sorts of reactions to inputs that she would have had normally.
I mean, is there any reason why you couldn't, create an inorganic brain and have the same, ions going through it, the same axons, the same dendrites, all of that?
You could, but I mean, like, for example, like the chemical interactions of various chemicals will interact differently with those artificially constructed brain cells. Okay. So you would have to have different things interacting with them.
Which is why Ernest would have changed it so that they would have mimicked the organic.
I believe that at that particular time frame, they're able to make artificial brains that can grow and rewire themselves exactly the same as human. In fact, actually, that's sort of a core premise of why real AI came about, is that the weapon-born brains are impactable and evolve just like a human's brain does.
Well, and then you get to the Chronos disease, which is basically, at some point in time, your organic brain dies.
Yeah.
And then what you do is you just implant it into a new organic brain that has been grown, or an inorganic one?
I don't. I mean, I don't really get into it a whole lot because I feel like there's like entire books that could be written about that stuff. I think that
Stay tuned.
that people would do both, quite honestly.
Ooh, that could be a whole new series.
I
Okay.
feel like if you'd already sort of like semi-died once because your organic brain and sort of the ideas about Crohn's disease is that your brain just eventually becomes just too interconnected and too interwired.
Yeah.
And it's got too many memories and it can't recall things properly anymore, which is basically what happens when people get really freaking old. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And some people have just happen more, some people it doesn't. But I think sort of they do believe that eventually we would all get dementia if we live long enough, is what it kind of comes down to. Which is kind of a horrible thing to think. That's like what's waiting for everybody at the end. But I feel like once you go through that once, you would probably say like, give me the inorganic brain so that doesn't happen again. You know, I want to just keep rolling the way I am. You know.
Yeah.
Well, nobody fights a pacemaker now, so I think it'd be pretty. It's pretty easy to imagine people doing that.
Yeah.
The interesting
No,
thing is
let
that
my
there
heart
are some
die.
people that don't. Marcus in Building Victoria refused to have anything done with him because he didn't want to change who he was. So he wouldn't even take rejuve. And part of the reason for that was because the Noctis didn't have early DNA samples. So the only thing they could do is they could use his DNA from when he was like 90 and then try and like make him young again, but they would have had to splice it and modify it because it was, you know, DNA mutates and is corrupted and whatnot. So he's like, well, it wouldn't be me, it'd be someone else. And he didn't want to be someone else, so he opted to die.
He's basing it off of his culture's life experiences.
Yeah, and his group of people had spent 1,000 years living normal lifespans with no rejuve and stuff like that. So for him, it was like a switch. Like you're going to be human and then not human.
Right. You know? Yeah.
So I guess part of it's going to be perception. Some people are going to always, I think, argue about this stuff as people change and whatnot, which I think we see in the books. Like for example, the even in the 90th century, Kylie Rhodes's family, they don't even have the link. Those people, because they feel that would make them inhuman. And and actually there's a sub story going on, and it's mostly in the Perseus Gate books that basically there's like another sentience war that's brewing, as people are still trying to figure out how to live with AIs, and that's still going on. There's an interesting thing too where I talk about, it's like I'm actually writing it right now in Earth Ascendancy, where Iris is being tortured, yeah, I know, isn't terrible. And she's thinking about the fact that like with an AI, they have no bodies and they don't connect to bodies the same way humans do. So their torture is always more horrible right away, because the very first thing someone does is start cutting into their mind, you know. Whereas humans, people just do sensory input the first time around. And then she's like, you know, humans have these bodies and they're defined by their bodies, but their bodies can grow back and be replaced very easily and be exactly the way they were before. But for me, when someone cuts out part of my mind, it's gone forever. You know, it's sort of a thing she's thinking about. Oh, don't be that sad, Jen.
This book is gonna fuck me up, isn't it?
No, I don't get into it too deeply. I can't hurt Iris that much. She's Irish. She's cool.
So what you're saying though is that the thread on the fan page, the Facebook fan page, that's all the things that Jen would say as she's editing a book, there are going to be some really interesting additions to that.
There might be, yeah. That might just happen. I might need to start a new thread because Facebook doesn't like to regurgitate threads. So if you comment on an ancient thread like that, chances are no one will see it.
I don't think it's been updated in a little bit either.
Oh, no, it's about time.
Where nothing has been interesting enough to go on there, I guess.
There was, but I was just in a rush the last time.
All right.
I remember watching a video recently by Isaac Arthur, and he was talking about how when you talk about, you know, the space travel and the time between places, and you know, you might have a branch of humans who go off to a planet, and the planet's a water planet, so they modify themselves and become, let's say, like dolphin-like, and they evolve that way. And then maybe, you know, if it goes far enough that, you know, they could evolve from there into something else, and then they meet up with the original kind of humans again, you know, and then those humans see these things and think they're alien, and they're not human, but they're just, you know, so far removed from us to be almost unrecognizable. But I mean, that's
they've like created themselves as a new species.
Yeah, so it's, you know, I mean, are they human anymore? And then maybe when they reconnect with humanity, do they then want to change back in, you know, and take those bodies back and transform themselves again? And it just creates some really interesting kind of.
Or
That's where
would they prefer to define themselves as different from humans? So maybe they self-identify as something other than human.
Yeah,
Maybe
maybe like we're not human. We're not human. We're dolphin creatures.
Right.
You know.
no, I think that's we don't have memories long enough to really be able to assess that, and maybe that's hopefully something will evolve over time. But you know, they're even now getting more information on epigenetic changes, like, you know, intergenerational. You know, the reason I'm fat is because my grandma was licking her plate during the Depression. And so, like, we're still learning about these, you know, these things that we don't even know that our bodies are doing, which I think, yeah, and it's funny too, because there's a thing that will happen that might be beyond our control, and there's how we feel about it. And so it's kind of ridiculous that we would be saying these things aren't human, but that's what we do, right? So,
Well, it comes down to perception being 9/10 of reality.
right.
You know, so if people, one of the things I think most places in Aeon 14, people are used to seeing someone go by with tricycle wheels for feet and stuff like that, you know, so it doesn't really count that much, but it sure would freak us out. Like, we would walk through like the most sedate spaceport, you know, in like, you know, in some truly boring place, and be like, these people are freaks, you know, like that guy's got an antenna in his head, you know, and that person has like a gun on their arm, and I don't even know what that is. And they're like, this is just a normal place here. Nothing's weird going on at all. You see the tentacles that person has over there, you know?
Yeah, and you're going back to what James said about, you know, how we so gradually come to accept things. Because 100 years ago, I guarantee you someone from way back when would come back and say the same thing about us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Dude is a wizard.
Yeah. He's so weird. Well, that, and like you like look at the people that get tattoos now, like the people that fully cover their bodies in tattoos. And when we were kids,
piercings,
that was when you were kids. Like, a full body tattoo meant you basically were going to live in a trailer park for the rest of your life and never get a job.
Everlasting job stopper.
Yeah, and now these people, they're just normal people almost. I mean, not everywhere, because all of society is not aging. You know, there are still a lot of old people out there that may not accept them. But for by and large, the younger generation are like, that's actually kind of cool. Hopefully it looks good when you're 90.
Andrew, are you seeing the same like tattoos in the UK as we're getting here in the US?
Full sleeves kind of stuff.
Yeah, we get that, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, you know, I'm sure you've seen kind of the really extreme body modification where they kind of split their tongue, or they implant things under their skin, so they've got lumps over their heads, and, you know, all that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I mean, I think in especially advanced kind of Western civilizations, then, you know, you get these kind of people that want to push what it is. You know, they want to become a cat, so they modify themselves to become a cat. You know, and that kind of. So
I think, but the interesting thing I think is it's just simply a matter of volume. The more people that do it, the more normal it is. You know,
that, and the ease of doing it. So in Aeon 14, I mean, you just walk into a clinic. You know, half an hour later, you walk out and you're purple. And, you know,
and let's talk pain factor here too.
Yes, pain too. Pain, absolutely. I mean, if it's not painful, it's reversible, and it's easy, more people will do it. It's just
I agree
human
completely.
nature.
That's actually
think about hair color. I mean, it's a really super simple thing, but how, you know, 50 years ago even, you know, no one would think about tinting their hair purple, but I mean, you know, how fun is that?
Yeah, you take someone from 100 years ago and you put them in a hair salon where people are getting bright pink hair, and they're going to freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there'd be some people that actually even today would say that makes them inhuman to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, most of those things are tied to religious
a
beliefs.
Really wild concept. Yeah.
I mean, the main reason I would not get another tattoo, because I have a tattoo, but I got it back at a time when that was like the edgy thing to do. And now it's like, why would I want to look like everybody else? It's not cool anymore.
I still just can't think of anything I'd want to put in my body for the rest of my life.
Rebel.
That's what it is. Like I get tired of stuff. I'm just like,
and pain.
I'm not worried about pain. Pain
didn't hurt that bad.
Through the pain, it's not that big a deal.
I mean, I've cut the tips off. I've cut the tips off of every finger I have. I've actually got divots in some of them where you can feel notches in the bone and stuff like that. So
holy crap!
And it didn't really hurt that much, so I think I'll be all right. Maybe I just don't have enough pain receptors or something. Yeah, I do a lot of woodworking, so
You're not supposed to touch the blade.
One time I was in a rush. I was doing fence posts, and I actually put my finger, this index finger, straight into the table saw blade, just
Use
straight
a
down.
pusher. That's what the pusher is for.
Pushers take too long. I don't use.
Really
I don't
don't.
use. I
That's
don't
the
use.
first thing you make is a pusher.
My table saws have all of the safety features removed.
Uh,
So there's.
well, I have a table saw like that too. That just lives in the backyard, but I have a healthy respect for it.
Okay, guys, let's talk about succession planning here in case something happens to Michael.
Well,
I
just
know.
do a
The
dolphin.
Aeon 14 Foundation.
Everything is dolphins when we
Yeah.
get to
That's
it.
how he's going to get his mechanical hands, like from.
Exactly. I get prosthetic hands. It'll be fine. Some of these people have
Yeah.
really hands. Actually, it's really cool. I've actually seen videos. Like there's this girl. I think she's like 12 or 14 years old, and she loves like funky prosthetic limbs. Like she's actually got like cool lights on them and all sorts of stuff like that because she just thinks it looks really cool. You know, now they can 3D print things. She actually has like these cool 3D printed covers for her prosthetic arms and stuff like that. And she actually loves the fact that she's a cyborg. She thinks it's amazing.
That's cool. That's good.
And it is very
And a
cool.
lot of it's her father's support too. I think that really helps her out. I mean, probably her mother too. Her mother's listening to the video, but there's a philosophy, a thought process. I don't know what it's called. I don't know if it's how well it's codified, but I read about it where we actually go through these stages as people as to what we consider to be like the natural order and how things are supposed to be. And like there's like until you're like 10 or so years old, everything is just brand spanking new and it's amazing. Then you enter in your teenage years, you enter this phase where you think that like you've now learned all the things there are to learn and you understand the world and you think that you've got it all figured out. And then that sort of, but it's still an age of discovery where you're still interested in discovering things. You just, for whatever reason, don't understand that everybody else already knows them. And that they were crafting the world you lived in the whole time. And then there's a period in your 20s to your 30s where new stuff is interesting and fun if you choose for it to be fun and interesting. Like you're like, wow, new cell phone, this is really cool. And then there's a period, once you're about 30 to 35 years old, you enter this phase where new things are now against the natural order. And where you feel like anytime that there's a new thing or things change around you, it shouldn't have happened and it would be better the way it was before. And then actually once you hit about 50 or 60, it actually modifies into these new things are an abomination and against nature. And it's a progression that most people actually go through in their philosophy and how they accept new things, new ideas, new technology and stuff like that. And one of the things I always wonder is as people live longer, how will those change? Will everybody still become completely set in their ways by the time they're like 50 or 60 years old? Or is everybody going to learn that they can sort of rediscover themselves later on? I kind of think that we do learn that. We are acting more like we can rediscover ourselves. It's okay for older people to act like they're young. But I don't know. I don't know what that would end up doing to society.
I wonder whether that's still the case because, I mean, things change. I mean, in this day and age, things change at such a rate now. You know, the advances that we make in science and whatnot. You know, do we still will people of our generation still go through those stages that you've still described, where we look at new things and think it's an abomination? I mean, you know,
well,
simple things like, you know, we work through Slack, you know, and that was a very recent thing that I discovered recently, but it's cool.
Yeah,
you know, and I've just turned 40, so.
I think it's cultural actually, and education, because I've met people that, you know, certainly my assumption would be that they would be able to navigate changes, but they just refuse, or they don't want to, or they see technology as making life hard rather than easy, you know, or they don't want to navigate a new system. And it feels like you're talking to a person who's 20, but they're acting like they're 75, you know, which just always amazes me.
James, do you think that's cultural or do you think that's a personality thing? I mean, because some people just get into ruts. And
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's cultural.
At least where I am, it's cultural. I don't know. Like, I also think we're in a weird time where people are buying into it as like an identity. You know, this whole throwback to the past and, you know, stuff like that I don't want to get into that in this context, but I think there are people that definitely buy into that as like a core part of their identity. And so they refuse to, or don't want to engage with changes that might make life better and all the things that come along with that. You know, communication.
I remember from my grandparents. I mean, I you know, thinking back, I don't really remember a time where I didn't think of them as old.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just it was just the way they were, and yet, you know, I look at my parents, and the way they've embraced, kind of cell phones and the internet and Skype and all these kind of things, and they love it. And it's just, yet my grandparents, just never would, and even to the point of buying them a mobile phone, and they'd just put it in a drawer. Forget that.
Yeah. I turn it on when I want to use it.
Yeah.
The one thing I think this actually kind of gets back to what it is, why we act the way we do as humans, is the main thing that we want as humans is security. We want to know that tomorrow we're going to be able to eat, and that our kids are going to be okay, that we'll continue on the race. Everything we do is about security and as much control over our environment as possible. And as you get older, your ability to adapt to threats to your security diminishes, mostly because you can't get the training for a new job, or you're just simply old and your body doesn't work as well as it used to. Like, a young 20-year-old, if he needs some extra cash, he can go like work as a mover, or he can go rake leaves, something like that. When you're 60, there's a lot of stuff you just simply can't do. Your options are become limited. So I think as you get older and your options become limited, and threats to your income or your security become existential, that's why older people, I think, embrace change less, because change is actually more threatening to them as they get older. If you're, because everybody knows you can't, we used to die before we got too old. The average, when they made the retirement age 65, the average lifespan for a man was 62. You were expected to die before you started to collect. And the idea was that after you got older than 65, you obviously, if you managed to make it that long, you were incapable of working. So we have to help you. And that age has shifted, but there is a point where you really can't have a meaningful income anymore. You can't work enough to make enough money to survive, especially as your medical expenses increase. So that's why I think as people get older, they don't like change, because change is actually an existential threat. They've worked their entire lives to build up security for when they get older, and change puts that security at risk.
I'm going to be a Skype guru with a Patreon page where people just pay me $10 so they can be in my presence over the internet. I'm going to grow my beard out, and I'm just going to look at them meaningfully, through the screen.
I think you're going to do great, James. You're going to be all set.
I'm going to adapt.
Yeah.
And
but I guess at a certain point, that you said, James, that it's society that makes people act like this, and maybe you're right, because these are all societal issues. The fact that old people have to worry about possibly starving to death or being in a home or something like that, and are very focused on making sure that they have security as they get older, so that those terrible things don't happen to them. It is all society. Society could change and make it so those things are no longer issues. And then people, maybe they would behave differently. Like, you know what? I am going to go and party in Ibiza at age 65 for a week, because it doesn't matter. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to go home, and whatever mechanism is in place to keep me secure, I'll still be there. That's what I'm going to do. That's when 65, I'm going to party in Ibiza. That's my plan now.
But will you be human or not? I don't think you'll be human.
Probably not. I'm a bionic man. $65 million man.
I know. So we need to get someone who's actually a transhumanist scholar to comment on this video and tell us, put us in our place.
Yeah.
But I find this kind of stuff fascinating. I think it's something we can probably revisit even in a year. But
we kind of touch on this topic almost every podcast.
We do. It's hard not to
to
talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts from anybody?
Mind blown.
Well, theory of mind is like a whole thing. Yeah. Anyway.
James loves this stuff. This is like breakfast for James. Like, I get to talk about cool philosophical things.
Well, I was just writing. Actually, I've been tweaking, because Michael's like, once we get to Vesta burning, we can lock it down. But I was even just writing a conversation between Lissa and Fuja Wong, where they were Fuja accidentally didn't refer to Lissa as human, and then they kind of got into it about like, are they not, like. I think it's a fun thing. I think it's something that people would almost like race a little bit, like this kind of thing that would just always be there, and always kind of navigating, trying to figure that out when you have people with these different experiences operating in the same, the same world. And there's always sort of a divide that we have to recognize. But I don't know. I think it's a really interesting thing to think about. And I don't see there being an answer for it.
Here's one crazy final thought is like, when you think about like what is humans, you can tie it to what's a species, for example. And I find it in in biology, I feel like they make some really weird distinctions sometimes between what are species and what are certain, what, like, these are the same species, this is a new species. It's like, well, they have the same DNA, and that just looks like an environmental mutation to me.
Well,
But all
everything
that,
has the same DNA, though.
Hmm?
I mean,
What?
everything has the same core DNA.
Mostly, yeah, except for octopuses,
Mostly, yeah.
because they're
Well,
freaks.
Goes there.
They're
But
aliens.
there's
They're
interesting thing
alien.
where one of the distinctions are whether or not things can mate together. Like, for example, Indian elephants and African elephants can't mate, but tigers and lions can. You know,
Yeah.
it's sort of it's some interesting
Well,
distinction.
and what do we do with those distinctions, right? We use them as ways to kill each other. So if the fewer distinctions we can come up with, probably the better.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of these, but I was going to mention that humans and AIs can mate in Aeon 14.
Ooh, this is true.
Well,
So,
I mean, they do. They procreate.
yeah. So what does that mean as far
But
as
they're
being,
creating a mind. They're not creating a body.
Bow chicka bow wow.
well, some well played, James. Well played. Sometimes they make bodies. There are human children of humans and AIs. It doesn't always just go one way. Sometimes it goes the other way too. In fact, there's actually like
Two AIs can't make
It's
a human.
genetic manipulation, kind of.
it is, but so is what happens when a man and woman get together.
Yeah.
It's the body is selecting different genetic traits from different pieces of DNA and putting it all together. It happens just because it happens right now without any agency doesn't mean that if it happened with agency, it wouldn't be the same thing.
Right.
You know, and they'd be less likely to screw it up. Right now, if we did it, we'd just screw everything up. Like, wow, your kid's got like 9 arms and 3 horns. Where'd that come from? You know? But
My mom
What
said,
hath science wrought? It all goes back to like the Frankenstein problem, right? Like Mary Shelley was thinking about these things, 200 years ago.
that's true.
Yep.
We're not that evolved. Mary Shelley already had this all there.
It's done. Why are we talking
There
about
are
this?
no original ideas, yeah.
I know.
It's true.
let's go listen to her podcast. She's got it figured out, right?
I know. Why is she letting us down? Damn it!
She never accepts our email. No, just won't do it.
I know.
It's not
She
right.
won't accept my Facebook request or whatever new thing.
Yeah.
Space.
Space.
All right. So I think we've
Facebook.
reached our hour. Obviously, we could talk about this more, and we probably will in the future. We're going to make Amy talk more next time. So,
Yeah, Amy's so quiet.
I know.
You have to just jump in, Amy. Just start spurting stuff out
I know.
verbally.
Yeah, you've got to throw it. Just ignore what anyone else is saying. If you've got an idea, just cut straight in.
You don't like interrupting people.
You're wrong. You're wrong on that. Throw your chairs.
We'll corrupt you, Amy.
Okay.
Can
Okay.
you imagine Amy getting angry and throwing a chair? I would be terrified.
Oh no! If I get angry, I am terrified to be around. Nick'll tell you.
Yeah, you're one of those people
Perfect
like,
venue. You can be as angry as you want. Just like
you're
throw
like
your
Jekyll
webcam.
yeah, Amy's like Jekyll and Hyde. I'm certain of it. You know, that's what,
Yeah, like if a customer service agent wrongs me, you don't want to be anywhere near.
customer service agents are like the most special people in the world, Amy. You know?
I know. It really takes a lot.
This is like a whole other topic, by the way, but there's this whole thing about how customer service agents actually work emotionally. They have this emotional toll to their labor that other people don't, because they always have to please the other person, and they have to act in the manner that will please the other person no matter how they're feeling. And it actually is one of the most exhausting kinds of work, because you can never actually be yourself. And
They get a form of something called compassion fatigue.
Yeah. And it actually
Ironically enough. Same as shelter
it
volunteers.
creates dissociative issues as well for them. They actually don't understand who they are after a while, because they spend most of the day not acting as themselves.
That started happening to me when I was working at the front desk of a hotel, actually, because I was always on display. I was always on, and so like for 8 hours, I was someone not me, and so like it was awful. Like even if I wasn't interacting with someone, I was in the lobby and I could be seen, so I had to like. I mean,
You
my
had to be on. You were functioning as an extrovert.
Which is more of an American thing. That's not as big in other places as in the States, for whatever reason.
No, it's still there. I mean, I've done, work, back when I was working day-to-day jobs. I mean, yeah, I mean, you put on a front. So yeah.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you don't want to be an asshole, because especially if you want customers. This was good. We had like a complete and utter unrelated segue. We have to have one of those in every single podcast.
I just got Target to give me like a free $10 because I was nice to their front desk person. But having worked in enough customer service, I just always try to like really acknowledge like I'm not mad at the person. I'm mad at the thing that's happening and what.
Oh yes, I always preface my statements with I'm not upset with you, but this policy is stupid, and then I'll go
Right.
off on my really long.
I need to
Yes,
understand how
I'm
someone
always
who
very
can
aware. And my mom was a
push for change.
therapist, so she had that emotional fatigue thing of having to
Yeah.
listen to people's problems and care about them all day. So
They're
I'm
real problems.
very familiar with that.
I just invent pretend people and give them emotional problems.
There you go.
There we go. Well,
That's his therapy.
I use my lessons learned from customer service hell.
Didn't realize
Okay,
that
so
the whole
anyway.
Aeon 14 universe was a bit of therapy
Right.
for
It's
all of us
ongoing.
authors. Yeah,
Ongoing for all of us.
cathartic.
Yeah, I'm
So
telling you about Lisa, because Lisa keeps making these terrible villains, and these horrible things happen and stuff like that. It's like, why does Lisa do this? Look at her, she's so smiley, but there's something going on in there. It is. It's because Lisa works for Hallmark, and she has to make happy-go-lucky things all the time for her day job.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much. Yeah, there's only so much Hallmark you can take.
I know.
you're missing out on like a whole line of cathartic Hallmark cards where you open it up and it just
It's
cusses at you.
amazing.
F off.
Your card that says "F you."
You're stupid. No one
You're
loves you.
Well, we're getting really close. No,
Are you?
Okay.
Like mean cards.
Actually, Lisa has
Moving
told me how
right
they have, like, Lisa has told me how they have like a cutting room floor of things that could never actually end
Right.
up on cards, and I think that
funny,
could,
but no. Yeah.
I imagine like you could like take those and you could make a mint,
Oh, yeah.
with the Cards Against
Don't
Humanity.
really
Oh
like
yeah. The things that happen behind the curtain are kind of funny.
I bet they are.
Mean cards. We should just do this anyway. We'll subvert Hallmark. Get bought out.
Yeah.
All right. So that was a good little segue. Hit us up in the Facebook group if you're not there already. Facebook.com/group/Aeon14fans. We're on Patreon. We're on iTunes as well. You can look us up there. If you just want the audio. What's that?
Google Play too now.
Google Play, YouTube. So you can, if you're catching this on video and you want audio, there are other ways to. I actually subscribe through Podomatic, Pocket Casts on Android, and it works really well for that. So, and if you have questions about where to listen, please hit us up as well. We want to make it easy for you to consume our podcasting. So get in touch and let us know if there's something you'd like to hear about. Yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks for listening, and we will see you on the Intrepid.
See you on the Intrepid,
Later.
folks.
Bye.
Bye.